Thank you, Sister Tammy, for playing for us. Thank you, Brother Arnold, helping with the offering. And thank you to everyone who's come out this morning to worship with us this morning. And I especially want to thank Joy Ranch for coming, making this a wonderful day for us. We look forward all year to you guys coming out. Best thing I like about it is the average age of the congregation goes down on today. That's a wonderful thing, and good to see everyone out this morning. I'm going to very quickly turn it over to Joy Ranch. They will be coming up, and I don't know how many. Are all kids going to get to testify, or what? All kids? Very good. I was hoping for that. I do have a very quick short message after they do that so that we can have setup completed over here. But we try to keep all of our people in here to hear you guys because we love you so much. So when you guys are wrapping up, our people will slip out and get over and set up. John and Mike, if you need to slip out a little earlier to set those tables up, that'll be fine. But I will try to give everyone over there a little bit of time before we rush over and bombard the place and have you guys still trying to set up and us move in wouldn't be a good thing. So Joy Ranch, if you would come and give your presentation. I do have a handheld mic up here for you.
Hello? Okay. I've got a big booming voice, and so I'm not too concerned about having the microphone, but when I have the kids come up here, some of them are definitely going to need the microphone. And even some of them that don't actually need the microphone, they'll act all sheepish and they'll get real quiet, as kids sometimes do, but I guarantee we've got a couple of them that they can outdo me with their boom of voice. But my name is Jason. My wife and I, Michelle, we've been at Joy Ranch for around 11 years. And sometimes you'll hear the kids, when they're talking to me, you'll hear them refer to me as Mr. J. And that actually has an interesting origin story. There was a kid that we had years ago. His name was Matthew Lowe. And him and I are superhero nerds. And so I am a huge Batman fan. And so huge, in fact, that I hate Crocs. Any of y'all know what the shoe Crocs are? They're hideous. But a couple months ago, there was this advertisement that they were coming out with a Croc that looked like, if any of y'all remember the Michael Keaton Batman movies and the Batmobile from that, they were coming out with a Croc that was made to look like that Batmobile. And so, of course, the day that came out, I bought those, and I've been roaming around Joy Ranch in my Batman Crocs, and the kids make fun of me all the time every time that they see me with them on. But just wanted to let y'all know a few things about Joy Ranch if you're not aware of it. We are a ministry, and we're a Christian ministry that takes care of kids. And it used to be that we would bring in kids, whether they were what we refer to as they were either privately placed or placed by the state, by DSS. And when I say privately placed, sometimes that sounds kind of like fancy, like we're some kind of private school, and you think, or at least for me, when I hear that word, I think of a private school, and these kids are coming from households with lots of money, but that's not the case at all for our kids. A lot of times, our privately placed kids, their parents are in a bad situation, and so the kids actually might be with their grandparents or some other family member, and then that family member needs a little extra help in taking care of the child, and so they'll come and ask us to place their kid with us. and we don't expect the families that do this, we don't expect them to pay anything. And so that's why it's so very, very vital for us to be able to depend on churches like yours. Like I said, this is by far the most consistent church visit that we go to. It's every year. I think we might have not come here one year in the 11 years that my wife and I have been here, and that might have been due to COVID or something like that. But so I would say for 10 years, we've been coming to this church, and y'all have been supporting us for much longer than that, and so we really do appreciate that. A benefit to having the kids being placed with us privately is that we actually usually get a lot longer time with those kids. When we used to have kids placed with us by the state, which we no longer have that because of certain laws and things like that that went into place that make it very difficult for us to take kids from the state. But when we did take them, they would only be with us for a very short while. And by short, I'd say it ranged anywhere between 6 months to a year if it was a kid that was placed with us from the state, which was great, and it was a wonderful opportunity for us to minister and love those kids. But it is, to me, it's very special to be able to have these other kids of ours who we've had for years. So a lot of them. Some of them, a couple of them that you'll meet, they're relatively new, but other ones of them that you'll meet, they've been with us for years, and it's just a blessing. So with that being said, yeah, the kids are like, oh no. If y'all could please come up. I got a list of questions here. Oh, are you going to be the first up? All right, we can't. All right. I will say, it's been a blessing for my wife and I to be able to have our girls be a part of this ministry. And so this is my daughter, and then the one that scurried down there, that's also my daughter. Before I forget, I do want to introduce, I say introduce, but Jean and Bethany, they've been here for just a touch longer than my wife and I. So we have Jean and Bethany. And then we have a special blessing of having our HR lady, Miss Autumn, and her husband Josh. They're with us, and their kids, Maverick and Peyton and Cormay, the little baby. And then, of course, we also have our director and his wife, Mr. Dan, and Miss Charlene. They are also with us. And with that being said, you ready for it? Okay. Now, you don't have a big booming voice like I do, so something that I learned from adrenaline when I was helping out, treat it like a ice cream cone. Okay. So, all right. Yes, pass it down the line. Okay. So, can you introduce yourself, please?
I'm Ellie.
What? Oh, no, I'm sorry. We're going to run through the questions. Okay, so, how old are you?
13,
And how long have you been at Joy Ranch?
almost 11 years.
Okay. And something I forgot to mention, but we are doing actual homeschooling for the first time this year. And my wife, Michelle, and then another one of our staff members, Miss Liz, they are helping out with that. And what is one big change since we were here last year for you?
The homeschooling.
The homeschooling. Okay. Um, and what's your favorite part about homeschooling?
Mm, probably that like we're all doing it together.
Okay. And what's your least or most challenging thing or least favorite thing about homeschooling? I don't know what you said. Yeah.
It pushes you harder.
It's harder.
Yeah, like pushes you.
Oh, challenge like it really challenges you. Okay. All right. And what's your name?
Mia,
And how old are you?
13,
How long have you been at Joy Ranch?
69 days.
Yes. So she hasn't now. See, I asked these two, and you'll find out. This is kind of funny. I asked these two if they could calculate the days, but um, that'd be a lot of days. Um, okay. And what is something that has changed for you in your life?
I came to Joy Ranch.
Yep. So she came to Joy Ranch. And what's your favorite part of homeschooling?
It's a shorter day.
It's a shorter day. Yeah. All right. And what's your least favorite part or most challenging part?
Um, Challenging homework, least favorite part. I don't know.
It's okay. If you are enjoying.
Oh, there's less people in the class. There's like
Don't like that there are less people in the class.
no.
Okay. All right. All right. And what's your name?
Julia,
Okay. And how old are you?
16,
All right. And how long have you been at Jordan?
8 years.
Yeah. So see, that's why I was like, yeah, it'd be a little bit challenging for them to calculate that. And what's something that has changed for you since we've been here last?
Getting a job.
Getting a job. Yep. Yep. Her first job. And what's your favorite part of homeschooling?
That is at home. So
Is
Like
your
that,
favorite part?
yeah.
Okay. All right. And what's your least favorite or most challenging aspect of it?
probably that there's more homework.
More homework. Yeah. Okay. All right. And what's your name?
Lily,
And how old are you?
14,
And how long have you been here?
8 years.
Okay. And of course, if you can't tell, these two are pretty obviously sisters. Um, all right. And what's something that has changed since we were here last for you?
I lived over at Leebrick, and then I moved over to Exodus.
Yep. Yep. That's true. Just to let y'all know, on campus, our cottages, when you pull up to where we're at, we call it the circle, and we have the girls' cottage, and the name of that cottage is Exodus, and then we have the boys' cottage, and the name of that cottage is Liebert, and we with our numbers being what they are and different dynamics and things, we've actually been able to kind of shift things around from time to time. And so Lily did live at Liebert for a time, and so yeah. And did I ask you about the homeschooling thing? Okay. What's your favorite part of homeschooling? Remember ice cream cone?
Yeah.
Cap, 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 cap.
I have more access to help.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That's actually really good. Really good. And what's your least favorite part or most challenging part?
Cold in the ERC.
In the year.
No, it's not. Yes, it is.
So they may have had like one day where it was kind of cold in the year. That's all. But we turned the heat on. So. Oh yeah, that'd be great. Y'all, here, Jackson, can you come stand right here, kind of in the middle? There we go. Scoot up a little bit. There we go. Perfect. All right. Okay. And what is your name, sir?
Jackson,
Jackson. Very good. Okay, and how old are you?
7,
All right, and do you know how long you've been at Joy Ranch?
4 month,
4 months. Okay. And what is your favorite part of homeschooling?
fun,
Fun. Okay. What do you like the least about homeschooling? Is there something that you don't like about it?
quiet time.
Quiet time. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Very good. Very good. All right. And what's your name?
Release.
All right. And how old are you?
15,
Okay. And how long have you been at Joy Ranch?
11 years.
Okay. And what is your favorite thing about homeschooling?
The schedule.
The schedule?
Yeah.
Okay. What's your least favorite thing about homeschooling?
Math and science.
Math and science?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. All right. And you have a different story than most, but we won't go into all that. So, a rough estimate, how long have you been here total?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I have a name.
Sorry. What's your name?
Daniel,
All right. And how old are you?
13,
All right. And a rough estimate of how long you've been here total?
over 3 years.
Over 3 years. Yep. Okay. And what's your favorite part of homeschooling?
Getting more help,
Getting more help. All right. And what's your least favorite part about homeschooling?
living and going to school with the same people all the time.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, and again, just want to say thank y'all so much for your continued support. And like I said earlier, this is we can count on it. We are going to be invited here and treated to a wonderful time with y'all and a very nice lunch with everybody. And we are just so grateful for all of your continued support for our ministry. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And to the young ladies whose parents are the actual, you're still with your parents? You live there because your parents live there? I want you guys to be able to meet my daughter, who is sitting in the back, and she was the one with the little red-haired boy that was making all kinds of noises and trying to be the center of attention. That's my grandson, my youngest one, and my daughter was in your position. We were foster parents for 8 years, several years back, and we, of course, were with a private institution, but all of their placements, of course, come through social services. So I know what you're talking about when you talk about short-term versus long-term kids. We had a few girls that were with us for about 3 years total. And, each child was 3 years. The unique situation we had with a couple of those, and one of them that did stay for over 3 years, was they brought their babies with them. That was a true unique experience. We became instant grandparents much younger than we ever expected because our kids were, 10 and 12 when we started, something like that. But we became instant grandparents, living with our grandchildren. We would love to live with our grandchildren now, of course, but that's not the way we do things in America anymore. There are still communities that do that. Amish communities do that. They move the children into the house when they get married, or at least the oldest son does. And that's how they pass on their farms. But anyway, thank you very much for coming. Y'all be sure and meet my daughter. Her name is Victoria. And for those of you that's been here several years, y'all will all remember Connor. And Oliver was here last year, but he was an infant. And of course, the older grandchildren, Jensen is 7 years old, so he's the same age as one of you guys. And Emma is 12 years old, so she falls right in the middle of you guys also. No? 11? She'll be 12 on her birthday. She just seems so mature. She seems like she ought to be in high school already, but she is still just in middle school. And I forget that they changed middle school. When I was you guys' age, middle school was 7, 8, and 9 instead of 6, 7, 8. So it was a different world for me. Thank you for coming, and I want to do a short message. You gave me a little bit more time than I was expected, so I do want to talk about Jesus and the Feast of Sukkot. The Feast of Sukkot is the last biblically instituted celebration that the Jews do. The very last one in the year is actually Hanukkah, that you guys might have heard of, celebrated around the time we celebrate Christmas. And it's not a biblically instituted festival because it was actually started in what we call the intertestamental period. There was a 400-year silence between the Old Testament and the New Testament, and that's when the Festival of Lights, or Hanukkah, was instituted. But the last one the Bible institutes in the calendar year is the Feast of Sukkot. You may have heard it called the Feast of Tabernacles. And the Feast of Tabernacles just means temporary shelters. And it's meant to remind the Jewish people that they were living in temporary homes for 40 years. We would call them tents. And before you leave today, you can actually see a physical structure of a Jewish Sukkot right across Church Street. When you go out this door, and if you just go into the parking lot and look at the building on the other side of our parsonage there across the street, on the side of their building, you'll see some kind of strange looking little structure. And for some reason, they have not finished it this year. They normally finish it at the beginning of the week-long festival. That week-long festival ended this past Wednesday, or Tuesday night, Wednesday, and they haven't finished it yet, so I'm a bit perplexed as to why they haven't finished it yet. Their kids are the ones that actually finish it. And believe it or not, Jews actually have Sunday school. They have Sunday school. We always think, oh, they have the Sabbath on Saturday. But they also have a Sunday school. And they meet over there on Sundays mornings, and sometimes you'll see the kids being able to go in over there before we actually start our church. But the Feast of Sukkot is mentioned a lot in the Bible, both Old Testament and New Testament. And we see Jesus at his final Feast of Sukkot in John chapter 7. Verses 1 through 13, it starts out with Jesus' brothers telling him, go make a name for yourself. Now, why would they be telling them that? Because if you'll remember, throughout much of the New Testament, whenever he would heal someone, in most cases, he would say, don't tell anyone. They would always tell someone anyway, but he would tell them not to tell anyone. He didn't want to make a name for himself. Why did he not want to make a name for himself? Because he told his brothers, he says, my time has not come. And he actually says in there, I'm not going to this festival for this holy time, this holy season. The Jews were required to go to Jerusalem no matter where they lived. They were supposed to go to Jerusalem 3 times in the year, and the final time was during the Feast of Sukkot. And he told them, my time has not come. He says, I don't want to make a name for myself. My time has not come. And then he turns around and he went on to the Feast of Tabernacles anyway. Now, why did he do that? Because his time did start becoming near. This would be his last Feast of Tabernacles. This would be the last time that all the Jews would be in Jerusalem together before the next Passover, in which Jesus was killed at the end of that Passover. Now, the Feast of Tabernacles is a very unique one because the Feast of Tabernacles is when all the Jews were supposed to come. Everybody. The other two, only the men were actually required to go. Why would they do that? Because the men would be the most able. The men did not have the responsibility of taking care of the children. The men did not have the homes to take care of. That was the women's job. So the burden was taken off of them for the other 2 seasons of travel to Jerusalem. They went 3 times a year. Now, all were welcome. They did not, they were not excluded if they wanted to come the other 2 years, the 2 times of the year. Everybody was always welcome in Jerusalem, but only the men were required. And even today, in the Feast of Tabernacles, in some parts of the world, the men still move into these temporary shelters. Now, this one across here, when you see it, you can see that nobody stays in there all week. But some of the men around the world in the Jewish culture still live in their tabernacle, in their temporary shelter, in their Sukkot all week long. These tents, these tabernacles, they are built for temporary purposes. The biblical application says they are to be built with tree branches with leaves on them. And even the top will have leaves across the top, but they could not make it so thick that they could not see the stars at nighttime. And they slept in that. If it rains, they sleep in that. They get wet. Now, in colder climates now, like in New York, I know that there's a large Jewish population in New York, but they will build a little more strong of a structure. They will even use plywood for the sides. Now, they still have a lesser roof, but to help combat the winds and the cold in the colder climates, they will build a little stronger structure for their week-long time in their temporary shelters. In verses 17 through 24, Jesus began teaching halfway through the week of this final Holy Week of the year. He began teaching because he knew that all the Jewish people would be there, and he knew that the Jewish leaders would show up. And this is where they begin to turn on Jesus. This is the time when they decide, we're going to kill him. And the Bible starts talking about that in this chapter. He instructed the people, judge not on appearance. Do not judge on appearance. He's telling the people, do not judge on how somebody looks. Now, why is he talking about this? If you go to Israel today, a large percentage of the people all look very similar unless you see the conservative Jews. The conservative Jews will dress differently. But otherwise, their facial features, their hair, their eyes, all look very similar. We have gone into a time in this country where appearances seem to matter more than they used to. When I was growing up, it didn't matter if you were black or white. And when I was even in 4th grade in the 70s, I had a good friend that was from India. The first person I ever met from India, I can remember his name, was Randeep Kalan. And nobody thought of him any different, even though he wore a turban to keep his hair up. And all of us had normal American looks. And we were integrated. Nobody thought any different between a black person, a white person, or the boy from India. It didn't matter. That's what Jesus wants us to be like. This country is turning around from that. We went through a period where it was becoming very black-white. Relations were becoming stressed and strained. And that's terrible on America. We need to remember what Jesus said, judge not on appearance. Now, the world has a very favorite quote that they use from the Bible. Does anybody here know what Matthew 7:1 says? be the favorite quote from the world that likes to tell us Christians. Matthew 7:1, the King James says, "Judge not, lest ye be judged." They like to tell us that because when we say that something is a sin, they don't want us to judge them. Well, we aren't their judge anyway. What Jesus is saying here is do not condemn a person, or you will be condemned for the same sin, because if you read all of Matthew 7:1, you find out that he's saying don't hold people accountable to a higher standard than what you live. That's what he's saying. And then he goes on here in John 7, he instructs us to judge with righteous judgment. That almost sounds complete opposite when you quote just Matthew 7:1 that says, "Judge not lest ye be judged." Yet he turns right around here in John 7 and says, he instructed them to judge with a righteous judgment. How do we know what a righteous judgment is? A righteous judgment is holding everyone, yourself included, to the standards put forth in the Bible. And all of those standards begin in the Old Testament. They all begin in the Old Testament. Some things are changed in the New Testament. But it's the laws that are changed, not the intent of the laws. We are to have a heart for people. We are to love everyone. That is what Joy Ranch is all about, loving on these kids that need some help. The Feast of Sukkot is also one of the feasts where they're to bring extra to give to God when they come to Jerusalem. All of the feasts actually have sacrifices that are brought to God, but some of the feasts, there's 7 feasts by the way, some of them require offerings brought to God. Now, if they're supposed to bring these offerings, that's not money. It's foods. It's things they have grown, produce of the field, sometimes even animals. What happened to all that food, do you think? It went to 3 different groups of people. It went to the Levites, who were the workers for the temple. It also went to widows and orphans. That's how they took care of those who could not take care of themselves. God's people came together under God's commandment and brought their food to them. If you'll remember in the New Testament, the Christian Jews started complaining because their widows and orphans were not getting the same amount, if any, food when the distribution was taken to the widows and the orphans. And that's when we instituted as a church what we call the office of deacons now. The deacons were to oversee that. Why were they to oversee that? Because those leading in the teaching of the scriptures were not supposed to take away time from studying the scriptures and teaching the people what God wants, to go and feed them also. It's a very designated office, a very important office. And if every church in America would get back to that, we would not need a social services program in this country. We would have places like Joy Ranch all across the country. But the church is failing. The church is failing in America, and that is why our country is in such turmoil, because we have been silent. The church has been far too silent in America, and we need to change that. The announcement at the beginning of the service, Crystal knocked. Crystal knocked is when the Jews woke up that morning. Their businesses were battered in, the windows were broken in, All of the Jewish businesses had been hit at one time. That's why it's called Kristallnacht, Night of Broken Glass. We remember that because the church in Germany was silent. And if you do not know about the Holocaust, you need to learn about the Holocaust and what happened. It's going to happen to the church here if we continue to be silent. Places like Joy Ranch are such an inspiration to me. I am so thankful that we are your consistent church that you come to, because I want to see our ministry be a ministry to you guys. I was so thankful to hear you guys switching to homeschooling. My daughter was homeschooled during the time we were also being foster parents. It was a super blessing for our family, and I hope you're finding the same blessings that we found in the what we think of as a modern thing of homeschooling. But in all reality, homeschooling is what founded this country, because when we started, there were no public schools. Every parent had to teach the child. And that's the way the biblical model was for the Jews. The parents taught the child. The parents learned from the people at their synagogues and their temple. That's where they learned, and then they taught their children. That's the way we need to be doing it in America today if we want to save this country.